Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Lanny Cohen. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Capgemini Group globally, and it's an honor and a pleasure to welcome you all here tonight for our third event. And again, a fantastic turnout. Not only do we have a big crowd, but we've got a little puppy with us tonight. And we've probably got the world's youngest entrepreneur with us, a 1-month-old baby right over here. So quite the mix of people. Just a quick word about the event and kind of who we are. For those of you who don't know us, Capgemini, we're one of the premier global systems integration, consulting, and outsourcing companies, headquartered in Paris, but with operations around the world. About 30% of our business comes out of here in North America. We opened up this facility, the Applied Innovation Exchange, here formally in February of this year, and it's one of 10 exchanges we have around the globe. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, we opened up our exchange in London. So I'll point out to you that anybody you see with a Capgemini badge on or a silver spade on their lapel, they're Capgemini people. So I invite you, when we're done, to spend a few minutes, get to know our company a little bit better, get to know what the Applied Innovation Exchange is all about. I think you'll find it's a pretty fascinating concept. And something we invite all of you to learn more about and hopefully engage with us going forward. As I said, this is the third event we've done, and we're really ecstatic to be able to do this one tonight. And I know many of you would be rather be home watching Hillary speak tonight, so we appreciate you not doing that and being here. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Leiden. Peter's our co-host and our partner in putting this event together from Reinvent. Peter?
Thank you. No, I'm right up here. That's good. Hey, thanks. Thank you, everybody, for coming here. It's great. And thank you, Lanny, for opening up this awesome space, these awesome tools. For these monthly gatherings. We're going to do them every month. We're going to be going through the year into next year, and it's really a place, I've been thinking for a long time, is that what we need is a place in San Francisco that cross-fertilizes different networks of innovators. There's so many interesting things going on in different fields in the Bay Area, and also a space to just let people with big ideas try something crazy, and that's, in fact, something that we're going to do. We're going to try some big, interesting experiment here with Saul today. Now, introducing Saul, a lot of people here know Saul. And so I was thinking, how do you introduce Saul? What box do you put Saul into? It's kind of an impossible task. But I will say this, what really got me turned on to Saul first was about 6 or 7 years ago, I watched him give a talk where he basically tried to figure out how human beings could solve climate change. And he basically had done the math and figured out what the kind of forward motion of the climate in motion and what we had to deal with, what we had to stay with and under, in terms of the 2% rise in temperatures, what we would take to shift to clean energy and sustainable practices, and he came up with this comprehensive plan of how we could pull it off with existing technologies and actually make it work. And I thought, oh my God, that's his brain, that's Saul's brain, and it was so awesome that my company at the time, we basically kind of did about 16 little short videos in this to get those ideas out wider. And so anyhow, that was like 6 years ago. So this time I thought, hey, we got this great series. And I saw Saul and the mission, our companies are near each other and for lunch. And I said, Saul, what would you do if you could just basically take over this awesome space, invite anybody you want, what would you do? And his first question to me was, do they got a big screen? And I said, well, they do have a big screen. They got a really big screen. It's like the size of a wall. He says, okay, great. Because what I want to do is present for the first time all this data on all this new data we're pulling together from all these databases on energy use in the United States. I want to show where the energy comes from, where it's being used, and where it's being wasted, and how we can actually dramatically kind of shift the game in that to actually make a much more sustainable way forward. I said, slam dunk, let's do that. And that's what led to tonight. And so Saul has been pulling off with his team an amazing thing here. Now, one thing before we get Saul, turning it over to Saul, I want to say it's not just about Saul. There's an amazing group of folks in this audience here. You all are kind of doing awesome things. That's why you're invited. And so what the plan is here tonight is essentially Saul is going to lay out this information and lay out what he wants to, this new data, this amazing data visualization you're going to see here. But he wants you to interrupt. He wants you to raise questions. He wants you to spot patterns in the data here and give your own kind of insights. And so it's going to be highly interactive. And because of that, we're also videoing this for the first time. We also want to get it so people who can't be here actually can see this. And so with that in mind, if you have something compelling you want to say, just hold it as we can get a mic to you. We're going to have a mic runner on this side, mic runner here, and we're going to basically be zooming in on you. And say who you are and what company you're from or what occupation you're from. If you're not from a company, we just want to grab that. And then ask away, give your insight, and then it'll all flow from there. And with that, I think as long as you kind of stick to that, we should just jump in to Saul and have Saul kind of explain his next big idea here. Saul?
Thanks,
Let's
Peter.
welcome Saul.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Peter really sold me when he said you can invite all your friends and we'll pay for the beer. And knowing my friends, I knew that was a pretty good deal. First thing I should do is thank my parents. They're actually here in the audience. Pamela and Russ. Obviously, they came to see my children. It just happened to coincide with this talk. They arrived from Sydney yesterday. I'm just going to jump straight into this. This is really an unbelievably nerdy talk. When Peter said we're running experiments, this is really a prototype for a talk that I may give in the future, depending upon how it goes, or maybe the last time it's ever done publicly. So luckily it will be recorded and we'll see how that goes. It's called 1,000 Cheeseburgers for reasons that we're about to find out. And I'll just dive straight in. A couple of thanks quickly. Arjun and Nikhil in the front here. You really should cheer them on. They built the prototype of the website that's up and running at Energy Literacy that has all of this data that we're trying to assemble. It's not so much new data, it's data that exists. It's just that I think we may be the first 3 or 4 people to read every footnote in every energy agency document ever produced. And then Dan there, he actually read most of the footnotes. And Alex Kaufman came up with the 1,000 cheeseburger thing. So that's where we come from. I'd like to dedicate this talk to Sir David Mackay. I don't know if many of you know him. He is a wonderful colleague, or was a wonderful colleague. He died earlier this year, sadly. He wrote an incredible book on energy, probably the best one out there, Sustainability Without the Hot Air. I recommend that you all read it, and this is to his memory. He's a wonderful guy. All right. There's a lot of nerds in this audience. There's a lot of energy nerds in the audience. For those, you probably recognize this. This is the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory's Sankey diagram for energy flows in the US economy. If you've never seen a Sankey diagram before, this is who it's named after, Captain Sankey. He was a British Navy captain, and he was the first person to draw a flow diagram of the energy flow through a steam engine for his boat. So these diagrams were named after him. You're going to say, why cheeseburgers? Well, if you look at this Sankey diagram, it's measured in quads, 97.5 quads. Does anyone here really think they know what a quad is? A quad is 1 quadrillion British thermal units. Does anyone here know what a British thermal unit is? Probably not. Makes it much easier to express it in a metric unit. It's 1 exajoule, roughly. It's also that many BTUs. It's about 100 watts per person per always. That's not terribly intuitive either. It's about 1/7 of a horsepower per person per always. It's about 800,000 kilowatt hours per day per year, because people like kilowatt hours per day for some reason, even though they divide out. Energy, no joke. So none of those units are terribly intuitive. Everyone knows what this is. This is a McDonald's cheeseburger. 1 cheeseburger per day per person is 0.1 of a quad. By pure coincidence, the US uses 100 quads, which means that if I can show you tonight the resolution of energy flow in the US economy to 1 cheeseburger resolution, you know to 0.1% all of the energy flow through the economy. And that's what we're going to attempt. Of course, not all cheeseburgers are created equal. The famous, I got to stay in the light, the famous In-N-Out cheeseburger that we all know and love here in California is 480 calories. The Hardee's 2/3 pound monster thick burger, I'm just going to show it to you. This is the most energetic hamburger in the United States. 1,420 calories, or a full 3/4 of your daily diet. The McDonald's hamburger is 290. I list all of these out. What we needed, in fact, to make this work was a magical hypothetical cheeseburger that was 210 calories. The White Castle cheese slider, which is hamburger-ish. It's close. Anyway, the point is, really, I think a lot of people in the energy industry, they bamboozle everyone and they make it an impenetrable subject by obsessing about the units. I think you don't need to care. Really, to understand the challenges of solving climate change and the energy economy, I think it's one of understanding the proportions of flows. So we're just going to use the cheeseburger as 0.1%, or 10 cheeseburgers as 1%, or 100 cheeseburgers as 10%. But I'll probably forget and go back to talking about quads because that's how I was trained. There it is again. I did ask for In-N-Out burgers to be served for dinner. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. All right, so one cheeseburger, 0.1% of the problem. That probably means it's a problem worth working on environmentally. That means we only need to solve 1,000 problems, which would be great. Economically, 0.1 or one cheeseburger is about a $16 or $17 billion opportunity in the US. So it probably means it's worth solving for economic reasons as well. All right. With that, we're going to navigate over here. All right, so I've said Sankey diagrams. I've talked about energy. That's already confused a whole bunch of people. This is a Sankey diagram of your household budget. So this is how do we get you all up to speed on Sankey diagrams. Over here on the left is your income. Let's say you have principal income in orange there and other income in blue. That makes your household budget, which is 100% of your household budget. Money, like energy, is conservative, so you can't spend more, well, Americans do a little bit, than the money that you have. But you have 100% of your money there. This is actual data from US Census. If you are the average family, your transport budget is, you can see that we have this in quadrillion BTUs. You need to ignore that. Let me go back. Here we go. Of your budget, let's just use proportions. So transport is about 15 or 20% of your household budget. Housing here is about 30%. Some of that is household operations. Some of that is actually the roof over your head and the energy to do it. Some of it is the utilities and the fuels, about 10% of your budget. Food is about 20% of your household budget. That's here. This is everything else, which includes your pensions. We spend that much money on education, about 2%. But you can see how all of your money flows through. In our household, this one's a little bit bigger. This is alcoholic beverages. What else is interesting? Personal care and hygiene. We don't spend enough, maybe. Also in my house. So that's the Sankey diagram. It's fully conservative, so you have the same amount of energy or money on both sides. All right, so let's go. This is, in fact, the Lawrence Livermore National Labs representation done through our website and software. So you can see here that in the US, it's powered 8 quads or 80 cheeseburgers from nuclear power, 2.5% or 25 cheeseburgers from hydropower, natural gas, wind, coal. You can see them all through here. Coal mostly goes to electricity. Oh. We finished the website at 5:30. Can you tell? All right, so that was Lawrence Livermore. This is our representation, and again, you'll see the same things over here. You'll see our primary fuel, so this is petroleum. So that's about 360 cheeseburgers, or 36% comes in oil and petroleum. Sorry, I might need to call on Arjun in a second. Every time I touch it,
Saul, I understand interruptions were welcome. Is
Yep.
the x-axis time, is it fluctuating over time? Is that what's happening here?
This data, no, this is always.
Okay.
So it's actually, most of this data is measured, some of this data is measured annually, some of it's measured monthly, some of it's measured once every 7 years in a survey run by a government department. But again, 100% of the energy comes in over here. So this is natural gas, which is now doing about 28% of the economy. And you can see from the natural gas that a portion of it up here is flowing into, so 4.8% of natural gas goes into the residential sector. You can see 3% goes into the commercial sector. We can follow that all the way through. The commercial sector includes things like education. So 1% or 80 of our cheeseburgers is in the buildings that we do education in. And you can go all the way through here to incredibly, so this is 2 cheeseburgers, or 0.2% of the energy flow is in driving plastics and rubber around inside freight trucks. Right, to give you a sense of the insanity. And then this is the manufacture of everything. So 0.1 cheeseburger for metals and aluminum, non-ferrous metals. All right. So we look a little bit upstream here. So this is where the traditional Lawrence Livermore begins. And we look upstream and we can see imports. So here is the 8.5 or 85 cheeseburgers, or 8.5% of our energy economy that we import in oil. We also import a little bit of natural gas, about 1%. We export a little bit of coal. There you go, coal net exports. We export about 1% in coal. And then interestingly, we also import, and so this is not traditionally covered, but we import about 10% of our energy in the objects that we buy, the stuff that you buy at Walmart and Costco and everything else, your shirts, etc. This is not actually traditionally included in the LLNL data. And a lot of this talk is actually going to be highlighting some of these fun facts, like 10% of the energy we use, we don't think we use. So if you think about this LNL data, it's how many of us, including policymakers, understand data and energy and make policy. And there's some fairly interesting, I wouldn't call them errors, because I think the data here is done very well, but the way politically it is represented, it ignores a couple of interesting things, such as the embodied energy in objects. So there it is. And then we're just using an assumption about waste. So there's the 10%. That's all of your stuff. IKEA furniture. You guys added that? We added that, although you can see in the reference here, this is actually EIA.
Global Energy Assessment.
Global Energy Assessment.
So it's an energy and trade study that was done in 2012.
All right, this is Dan, who I'm occasionally going to ask, because he read more footnotes. I read about a third of the footnotes. He read 2/3. So this is the Global Energy Assessment Study on all of the embodied energy trade flows around the world, and America is a net importer of that, to the tune of about 10%.
Quick question about communally shared consumed energy, like national defense or military, something like that.
Hopefully we will get to defense and military. In fact, I know we will. So we'll get there. No, you'll see it tonight.
Oh, great.
Yeah. If you imagine that we are unbelievably obsessive compulsive, and which we are, it means that we probably will answer your question in the next 50 minutes. So rather than, will you cover this, assume that we will cover it, but maybe like, oh, that's a really weird thing. So more comments on, wow, that is unexpected and weird, and then hope that the obsessive compulsion will do it.
Knowing a little bit about the background here, could you explain to them how much new information you brought in? Because you basically to me explain this.
There's this. I really need to be clear. The Department of Energy, the Energy Information Agency, and other government agencies, this is 95% of this data comes from those data sources. A few of these are from surveys that are in industry surveys, or from the Census Bureau, so economic census data. And I will talk about those. Those are a little less accurate in places. But this is really the first time that all this data is brought together into one flow diagram, and which is important if you sort of really want to understand the consequences through the whole economy of things like defense, which is actually a really interesting one. So I won't ruin that headline because we'll get there. All right, so here's another, on the topic of interesting, strange things about this. So this is solar energy, way up here. And you think we're doing great in our renewable energy revolution, and we are, and the second derivative is good, but it's still not a lot of power. So it's about a half a percent, 5 cheeseburgers of all of our energy production comes from solar. Although, if you look in the details here, and this is a weird thing, you'd say, well, what does waste mean in solar? And so we get energy services, so I understand that. I get some electricity from solar, and that's about 0.25%. But what's this 0.25% of waste in solar? And then interestingly, what you could say is, well, what if we captured all of the solar energy in North America, and then the value you get for the solar that we don't capture is about 60,000 quadrillion BTUs. So that's an infinite number of cheeseburgers. And you might say that's ridiculous because we're not going to cover all of the continent with solar cells at 100% efficiency. So if you instead said realistic solar, so realistic solar might be 1% of all of the land area of the US with 20% efficient solar cells, you would in fact get 120 quads, or more than 100% of our the energy required to run the country. But we're not doing that right now. We're just doing 0.5%, so that's not the waste that they're talking about. So what's interesting and a little bit political is this. So here's coal. You understand coal up here. So we input 170 cheeseburgers, or 17% of the energy economy in coal. And a huge amount of that goes towards electricity. And then a huge amount of that is lost to waste. So coal waste is actually, you get about 9 quads out of your 17 quads in coal. That doesn't strike me as exactly right. It turns out that you get about 30% of the energy out of coal when you burn it in our production fleet. And so what happened to solar, and in fact also to nuclear, is here's nuclear currently. Again, 8 quads goes into the grid, and you see this giant amount of losses, 5 quads. Why is what's lost in nuclear? And for an odd reasons, to treat all of the renewables and nuclear fairly, at some point in history, we decided to treat the efficiency of coal and solar the same way we treat the efficiency of coal. So what's weird about this is it means that waste doesn't really exist. It's not happening. Nuclear, another way you might measure nuclear waste is, did we get all of the energy out of the fissionable materials? But we get about 3% of the energy out of our fissionable materials in our nuclear reactors. So in fact, that would be the waste if you measured it that way, much higher. Again, that would also be a weird way. That would totally pervert the whole diagram, so we don't do that. So what is, here you can see, we actually now call this nuclear political waste, because for political reasons, we send that off. And we have,
What do you mean by that?
For an arbitrary political reason, somewhere in a government agency, somewhere in the last 30 years, we decided to use the efficiency of the grid, which is largely dominated by the efficiency of coal, as the assumed efficiency of nuclear power.
When it's not.
When it's not. Nuclear power is probably 55% efficient in the steam turbines that they're running at scale. So you could say maybe that's the efficiency used. It's a little bit weird on that issue. And solar cells, well, we all know of solar cells as about 20% efficient, but again, you've got to figure out what the denominators are. I'm going to argue that we may put that aside and just say, what's interesting here, because of this, is of the 100% of energy that we think we need to create to solve the problem, all of a sudden we get an 8% discount, because we don't, that energy didn't exist in the nuclear or the solar, or in fact, we treat hydroelectricity and wind is treated the same, so you can see this is sort of the artificial waste from wind, etc. On the downside of this, it means that we think we've installed more than twice as much solar as we actually have. So solar is closer to 0.1% than it is to 0.25%, which is an interesting issue. All right. So there's 10 quads that never really, nearly 10 quads that never really existed. The waste from nuclear, wind, solar, and etc. So again, like I said, good news, it means to solve the climate problem, we just need to do more of these things, but we get an 8% discount on the amount that we have to do. All right, so here's, I'm going to switch to cars. So here's a car. Over here on the left-hand side, this is the fuel you put into your engine, and you've got 100% of that fuel. You've got a gallon of gas. That goes into the engine. You can see up here, this is heat exhaust. So you lose 22% of the energy in your gasoline going into the heat of gases in the exhaust. You lose another 8% in heat radiated from the engine block heating up, other parts of the car heating up. The engine cooling system absorbs about 40% of the energy in the gasoline. The noise, obviously cars are noisy, 1% is lost there. And you get motive power, so this is power to the wheels of about power to the transmission, sorry, of about 29%. Engine ancillaries, engine ancillaries, so this is running the generator, other things. Well, actually, here's the generator. It's about a 1% loss. Other things that run off the engine power, about 2% loss. The transmission losses are around 4% in the average car. So actually, put into motion is about 21% efficient. That's how much you get out of your car. Rolling resistance, so this is the tires interacting with the pavement. Average is about 7%. This is interesting. Aerodynamic drag is about 11%. You really should put your hand up right now and say, at what speed? Right, so when Jimmy Carter said, let's go to 55 miles per hour, he knew that at 55 miles per hour, this would go down by a significant amount. And it escapes with the square law. And then you lose, on average, 2.5% in braking. Anyway, it turns out that all of that adds up to 79% is wasted, and that's the number that is used. Oh, I'm going to jump forward in the automotive section. Wait. Sorry, we really did finish. You can tell now that I finished at 6:30, 5:30. Electric car. Okay, so hold that figure in your head. 79% of the energy is lost in cars. We're going to come back to that. It's pretty interesting. If you instead said, well, I drove here tonight in a Tesla, am I better? We're going to start with electricity input, so the same 100 units. Energy lost in charging is assumed to be about 15%. Parasitic losses, about 2.5%. Electric drive system losses, about 16%. Power to the wheels, about 65%. So this is kind of interesting. It's about 3 times better, so 65% to 21% than your gasoline car. But when you hear the true nerds say, well, it depends on whether your Tesla ran off your solar cells on your roof or off a coal-fired power station, this is why. So the 3x you lose for running off a Tesla off coal, it makes it basically equivalent to a gasoline car. This is why we need to electrify the whole grid a lot more, and cars, because there is a giant win here if we can get to electric vehicles. I'm going to come back to that to transport even more. So let's go to electricity. Here is electricity. You can see everywhere that it travels throughout the economy. Electricity is about 38 quadrillion BTUs. A huge amount here, you can see, is lost, 23%, or 23% of the 38% is lost. Here are where all of those losses go in electricity. Something weird happens every time I touch the... All right, bear with me for a second. Electricity waste. Now, a lot of people believe that transmission and distribution losses are a large portion of the waste in the electricity sector. They're actually tiny. This is them. About 1% is lost in resistance in the lines and heat in all the transfer stations. So it's all of the waste in electricity really needs to be understood as the inefficiencies of burning coal and burning natural gas. Right? So that's where the majority of these losses are, and then these peculiar political losses.
Just to underscore the political losses thing, you said that the nuclear, solar, and wind are much more efficient than they are built.
In one respect, they're less efficient than they are built, because this roughly calls them 33% efficient, but you know that your solar cell is 20% efficient. But the resource is so gigantic, why use that? And then in nuclear, it's like, well, if we recycle the fuel and go through all of the other isotopes, then you can get much, much more energy out of it, but we don't, which is why we only get 3% out of it.
Only the US does.
Yeah. Mostly only, well, a number of some countries recycle. Recycling nuclear fuels is somewhat unpopular because you go through weaponizable isotopes. So it's difficult to hold them to any standard. I kind of think you should just think of them as, it's probably easiest just to think they're for this purpose, 100% efficient, and we should just do more nuclear and solar, because they're the ones that are clean, right? All right, so now we're going to go into transportation. We're going to zoom in on transportation. This is kind of interesting. So now you can see highway transportation, non-highway transportation. Non-highway transportation includes things like water, rail, and pipeline fuel for natural gas. So this is kind of interesting and kind of important. Here's nearly 8 or 9 cheeseburgers, or about a full % of the US energy economy, is spent in pumping natural gas around in all the pipelines. There's actually about 10 times as many miles of natural gas pipeline as there are of roads. There's 4.1 million miles of roads, in case you're wondering. And so all of the resistance losses of pumping that natural gas through all those pipes sums to about 1%. Here's rail. It's 0.5%. Freight rail is nearly all of it. So 4.6 cheeseburgers, or nearly 0.5%. And passenger rail is like less than 0.1% of all the energy flows. This is water, so this is all of the shipping that we do. It's about 1% of the energy flow. I kind of think anything that's 1% is interesting. And here is air travel. In fact, we can break this down in an even better way to look at it. So here is non-highway air. So 1.7% of all US energy flows is in air travel. Freight is about 0.1%. Domestic carriers is about 1.5%. This random fact sticks in my head. 80% of travel is recreation, 20% is business travel, half of business travel is to attend a meeting. So then you'd say, I'm going to make the best video conferencing ever and prevent anyone from doing air travel. And potentially that's a $17 billion market because it's more than 0.1%. So someone in the audience should solve that problem. Obviously, I'm not good at software. I have to have people help me, so somebody else should do that one. All right, so let's go into transportation related. So agricultural equipment, this is driving around all the tractors. Construction and mining equipment is, about 1% is in the diesel fuel for, largely the diesel fuel for running construction and mining equipment, those things. Recreational equipment, and we didn't break this down further, but we could have. You can see, so small it's hard to get. So 1.8, 2 cheeseburgers, or 0.2% for recreational equipment. I think 1 cheeseburger is boats, and maybe the patty is lawn blowers. You can get to that resolution, lawn mowers and lawn blowers. That's for the next talk, or the next version. All right, let's go to highway travel. Here it is. Buses are a tiny bit up there. Buses are about 0.25%. Commercial light trucks, about 0.5%. Freight trucks are about 5.5%. You can then go into class 7, 8 trucks. So these are the big rigs. These are the 18-wheelers. You can see here 0.5% is in moving foodstuffs and fats and oils around. You can go into crazy detail. So moving crushed stone and gravel, it doesn't make us sound like an advanced civilization, is about nearly 1.5 cheeseburgers, 0.1%. Moving meat, poultry, fish, and seafood around, again, is 1.5 cheeseburgers. Moving newspapers around is 1.5 cheeseburgers. There seem to be the interesting ones there. Moving plastics and rubber around is 2 cheeseburgers. Driving trash around is a couple of cheeseburgers. Here's your class 3 trucks. Class 3, 6 trucks, so these are sort of the box trucks, sort of the 10-ton to 20-ton size. Again, you can get the breakdown on those. Then we get into light-duty vehicles, about 15%. So this is a really big, important topic. This is actually why electric cars are super important. Depressingly, of the 15%, only a little less than half is in cars. And cars, by American standards, are up to like 7,000 pounds. And then light trucks, which I believe goes up to 10 or 11,000 pounds, is about nearly 80 cheeseburgers, or 8% of the flow. You can get into more detail on things like cars. So using your car to earn a living is about 2.5% of the US energy flow. Here you go. Family and personal business, about 5%. Driving to school or to church is 7 cheeseburgers, or nearly 1%. I actually was at a conference with the guy who runs driverless cars for Tesla, and I said that this much energy is in driving to school and church. He's like, no way, I have the data. And it's like, he's got all the data from all the Tesla drivers. And it's like, in what world do you think Tesla drivers represent the average in the US economy? He wouldn't agree. Anyway, he has the data, so you should ask him for better data. Social and recreational, 3.5%. Then another interesting way you could divide it up is 1.5% of all of our energy flow is in 0 to 5 mile trips. So the short trips we really get penalized for. That's not including short trucking trips, that's just short trips for us as individuals. Another 5.5% is into 5 to 20 mile trips. So there's like fully 7%. Actually, I think a lot of people get excited by Uber and Lyft and all of those other things. They're known as carriage services. Traditionally, a carriage service, if you want to know, you drive about 1.6 miles for every mile that the passengers go, because you have to search and find them. And Uber and Lyft are a tiny bit better than taxis, but not a great deal. So in fact, if you're driving an Uber, you're screwing the planet 1.6 times more than a personal car. So right now, I'm not super excited about them, but if they really succeed in very lightweight, short distance autonomous cars, you can build an argument that that is a giant, like 5% of the economy opportunity. Right now, the conversation is a little overexcited about maybe we might go in the wrong direction with that one.
I actually work at Lyft. So
You might have better data on Lyft, I'm sure.
the argument of like car utilization, like because you're utilizing the cars much more.
Okay, we could go into it. All right, so the question, young gentleman here works for Lyft. I trust that he knows more than I do about Lyft. And his question is, what about car utilization? Obviously, cars are going to get utilized more. That would be great if the cars were small and light and very efficient. I don't know if the average of your fleet is better or worse than the average of the American fleet, so I can't comment. The only Lyft cars I've driven in are bigger than the electric Fiat that I own, or my wife owns. So I don't know. And I can tell you some random facts. In fact, we'll get there in a second, so let me answer this question. It comes in the next slide. Is transportation blowing up again? You can even go into, moving coal and petroleum products around as a quarter of a quad, or a quarter of a percent. There's moving your meat and poultry. There's your waste again. All right, so this is the industrial sector. So I'm going to answer your question the long way, but it's one of the most interesting questions we might face tonight. So here's the industrial sector. The industrial sector includes manufacturing. It includes agriculture, so about 0.8%. It includes construction, which is about 1.5%. It includes mining, which is about 3%. Let's have a look here at zooming in on the industrial sector. So there it is, manufacturing, agriculture, construction, mining. We're going to zoom in again on industrial, blowing all the way up. I will also, this is the second most interesting question tonight. The question is this only manufacturing happening in the US? The answer to that is yes. The 10% of embodied energy that we're importing from other countries is them manufacturing stuff for us. But this is only the stuff we manufacture for ourselves. And so,
Or for export.
or for export.
Do we know how much of that we're exporting in terms of embedded energy?
The ratio, the question is, do we know the ratio of the energy we import to the energy we export in the form of products? The answer to that is in unbelievable detail we do, and even by zip code of the country that we send it to. I can't remember the exact number, but we are importing about a third of, we are net importers of a third of our stuff in an energy sense.
And say for transportation fuel, does your left axis begin at the pump, or does it begin at the well and capture all of that?
Well, in the very first, the question is where are we measuring? In the very first slide, I tried to say, well, we went even further back and we went to where you import it from, and we showed that we import 10% of our energy in the form of oil. So we went back. So we can go all the way back on that. So now I'm carrying 3 or 4 questions concurrently in my head. There's been some sleep deprivation, I'm not going to lie to you, so we're going to have a moratorium on new issues until we resolve those issues. All right, industrial blow up. So here's manufacturing. This is super cool. 200 cheeseburgers or 193 cheeseburgers, 20%. Food manufacturing, a little over 1%. We can go down. In food, you can do crazy detail. Animal slaughtering and processing, in case you wanted to know, is a full 2 cheeseburgers, or 0.2%, quarter of a percent. Grain and oilseed milling, so crushing stuff is pretty important. Fruit and vegetables, preserving and specialty is a cheeseburger. Here's beverages and tobacco. I don't know why they can't break them out. Textiles, you can go, wood products is big, paper products is huge. So fully 2.1% of our energy flows is in making paper, which includes newsprint, paperboard mills, that's cardboard, paper, other, pulp, and paper that's not newsprint. All right, printing. Here's an interesting one. Oh, petroleum and coal products. Under manufacturing, 6%, 60 cheeseburgers, goes to petroleum coal products. We'll go down that rat hole further. Petroleum refineries use 6%, 60 cheeseburgers of our energy. That, to answer someone's question, is a little bit odd that we don't count that in the energy cost in the oil on the input side to transportation. So if you think about that, it means that every car that you think is getting 40 miles per gallon is getting 30 miles per gallon, and maybe worse. There was a question?
Yeah, half the value, supposedly, of petroleum goes into the plastics rather than the energy production.
Plastics is elsewhere in this graph.
But the refineries are for producing plastic. It's plastic feedstock, not just energy.
We will cover that, but in a tiny proportion. The great majority, I'm not going to niggle 1 or 2 cheeseburgers with you on this one, is in making oil for your gas tank. All right, asphalt paving and mixture and block, other petroleum and coal products, like your plastics. Petrochemicals, like your plastics, there's another 1% there. Carbon black, stuff that you stuff into tires to make them run longer. And you go through all of these things. Ethyl alcohol, I don't even know what it's used for. I think it's in everything, judging by the fact that it's 3 cheeseburgers. This is really interesting. Other basic organic chemicals, fully 1.2%. Every time you get a 1%, like we're data nerds, we're like, oh my God, what's down that rat hole? That's a big one, that's really important. Turns out that all ammonia-based products are here. Ammonia-based products include nitrogen and all the fertilizers. They also include all of the explosives that we make. For some reason, this is one data set that they just say you can't go further down this hole. Do you think it's because of the amount of fertilizer we're producing or the amount of explosives we're producing? I don't know. Anyway, about 1%, or actually about, if you look at other industrial surveys, about 0.6% is probably in fertilizers, and about 0.25% is in pesticides and herbicides. Synthetic, okay. I've got to remember the other questions I was going to answer. Your question about, what about the higher utilization rate of cars? Well, you can sort of get a sense where I'm going here. There's cements, so 0.25% is in cements. These are the things that make buildings, but also make a lot of roads. So roads come out of here. Iron and steel mills, fully 1%. You can break down iron and steel mills. Probably 10 to 20% of that is in the automotive sector. And you can keep going down here, more and more and more. From manufacturing, the interesting point about that is, to me, wood products is fully 3% that makes up wood products, paper, printing and related support, and furniture. We're going to come back to that topic too. Here's the petroleum refineries that we talked about. Here's mining. So we went into manufacturing and we're going back up the tree, we go to mining. Here's oil and natural gas extraction. So we're also not including in the energy cost of that transportation sector the mining cost of oil and gas, which is fairly significant. This again is rock crushing, materials handling. This is mining. So this is how we count transport today, which is literally just we break it into highway, non-highway, transport related, these things, going down to these things. You've seen that picture. I'm going to ask you all to hold one number in your head, actually 2, and do some addition. 20 quads is waste. 7 quads is energy services. So remember that. 27 is how we count transport right now, 27, 28. If I go one slide ahead, if you roughly if you did your best effort to account for the steel in cars, the cement in the road bases, the asphalt, the bitumen, the energy in petroleum refineries, et cetera, this is what transportation would touch upon, all of these things. And you end up with a number for waste more like 23, and energy services 10, so you're up to 33. So there's another 5, 6% on cars. That doesn't exactly answer your question. In more depth, the average American car is now being driven nearly 200,000 miles. The energy cost of the average American car is equal to the fuel it consumes roughly after 18 months, roughly after 30,000 miles. I think. If you're in an electric car, you put a whole lot more energy into making the batteries, so it takes you twice as long to win, but then you win big. So if you get electric cars, you've got to make them last a real long time, people. You've got to put a second battery pack in them. If you only run out the one battery pack, you probably don't get there. But it becomes super interesting. So I didn't exactly answer the lift question about we have higher utilization, except to say what you really want to do is encourage lighter weight cars, owning them longer, putting a lot more people in them. The far more important thing for you as a company, as Lyft, is in multiple person sharing of the vehicle. That will dwarf anything else you can do. There's a question in the back. Hybrids are half. The question is, I've talked about electric cars, I've talked about gasoline cars, can you talk about hybrids? I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, so I'm thinking about climate change is real for people I love. In which case, hybrids, I think, you know, I would like the hybrid thing to only last another few years, and then we're all electric, because hybrids are still going to use a fossil fuel. But if you want to know, your conscience should be, you know, you're right in the middle. If gasoline car is here and electric car is here, you're here. And as you can see, the accounting gets difficult. Bicycles, however, I could talk about all night in great detail, anyone who knows me. There's cars and trucks again. All right, so we did. We're now going to talk about the commercial sector. It's pretty significant. It's about 9%. The commercial sector is pretty interesting. It uses a lot of electricity, about 5% of the US energy flow. About 2.5% is in natural gas, tiny bit of fuel oil for heating, tiny bit of district heat. So this is generally cogen plants that are producing steam. They then recycle that steam and use that to heat the buildings. What is it actually used for? Education, buildings we do education in the commercial sector, nearly 1%. Food sales, 0.25%. Food service, 0.5%. Inpatients, hospitals are 6 cheeseburgers, 0.6%. Outpatient healthcare, 0.2%, 2 cheeseburgers. Lodging, hotels. Retail, 0.36%. Enclosed and strip malls are nearly 1% or over 0.5%. That just sort of blows my mind. We live in San Francisco, so you forget, right? All of those middle states are all this. Offices, public assembly. This is kind of interesting. All of our police stations and public order and safety, which is grossly police stations and fire stations, are a cheeseburger. Churches are twice that, 2 cheeseburgers in religious worship. Service industry, warehouse and storage, 0.5% is in warehousing. There's a thing down here called vacant. So, I don't know, the cheese on the cheeseburger is in vacant buildings. And commercial other. You can then sort of look at this in terms of heating. So a huge amount of it is for heating space, about 2%. Air conditioning is a giant one. Ventilation, so HVAC, really you get penalized for. Water heating. Cooking is big. We're going to come back to cooking later. It's about 0.5% is commercial cooking. Your cooking in the home is actually much worse. Refrigerators, commercial refrigerators are nearly 1%. Think about that. Here's the commercial blown up. Oh, I didn't realize I could do this. Wow, there you go. This is much easier. Education, food sales. Wow, Arjun, this feature's great. Sorry, everyone. Computing, I think, did we get? Oh, in industrial. Oh, so server farms, if we go back, are actually in industrial. Server farms are interesting. Did we do industrial yet? We did. Mining. Data centers, there you go. So the cost of data centers is 0.25%. Just sort of interesting. It's probably a good percent. It makes us travel less, makes us read less newspapers. You saw how much energy was in newsprint. So you can build an argument here, this might be better. Oh, lost my place. We're going to try again. Where were we? All right, residential. All right, here's the residential sector. It's about 11%. There it is. We're going to go in even more detail. Residential, interestingly, is single-family detached homes. So the majority of it, about 7.5%, is in detached. Single-family attached is about 0.5%. Apartments are pretty big, 0.6%, 0.8%. This is really interesting to me. 0.5% of the energy flow in the US goes through mobile homes. So again, we live in the Bay Area. You don't sort of think about these things. You can break those down into multifamily and single-family houses. Again, space heating is very big. 4.25% is in heating our homes. Nearly 2% in heating the water in our homes. Air conditioning, which sadly is the fastest growing, I think here, or the second fastest growing to data centers. Refrigerators in the home, another 0.5%. Other residential stuff, including lighting in your house, nearly 1%. Electronics, your washing, so washing your clothes, washing your dishes is 0.5%. It would be possible to actually do this with all the historical data, and you could step through big changes that happened. An amazing thing happened about a decade ago. We invented cold water enzymes for doing dishwashing and clothes washing, and this number fell by half. So in terms of like super non-obvious, very amazing thing, and in some respects this effort that we're doing here and the thing that we're doing at Otherlab is try to find opportunities here where you can throw technology at important energy problems. And to be able to identify the opportunity of cold water enzymes as like 0.5% of the economy or more is pretty damn cool, I think. Cooking in your home is nearly 1%. It's pretty big. Other appliances, you can get there. This is an interesting one to me. Anyone know what a heat exchanger is? A few people. They're kind of important. So this is all of the energy that goes through heat exchangers, including the ones in power plants. Yep, and the efficiency of nearly any machine is determined by the efficiency of the heat exchanger. And you look at how much it is. So 16% and another 32%. So that's what, 48, call it 50%. Half of all of our energy flows through heat exchangers. I don't know, 3% of the audience know what they are. I see some grins of the people who do know. I happen to geek out on them. I know Vince in the back is totally in love with heat exchangers. Yay, Vince. But so here's some important things to work on. This is interesting. This is government sector. Here you go. The government actually collects a lot of data. This is only federal government. We could give you state government energy data by every state and every agency, but it's really tedious. Really, all you want to know here is of the government sector is about 1%, fully 10 cheeseburgers. There's one really big one, right? You can go up here and you're like, yay, NASA. I think they're the sesame seed, right? On the bun, we can go to the moon with, we used to be able to go to the moon on the sesame seed. Anyway, Department of Agriculture, other US government agencies. Department of Energy itself uses, the bun. What about this one? Department of Defense. It's pretty big. It's nearly a full percent. This does not include the energy in making the tanks and the battleships and the bullets and all the other stuff. That's in industry. This is just the PG&E bill of the Department of Defense. Turns out the E doesn't really cut it much. There's the electricity for the DoD. Actually, it's all about natural gas, so they like to air condition their buildings and heat them too. But it's more about the diesel. So a cheeseburger and diesel. But really, it's about jet fuel. So 0.5% of the US energy flow is in flying military jets. Then you should then ask yourself the question, because we're in San Francisco, you're allowed to, should you put this on the transportation budget? Think about that. Or not.
We saw it already, I think, but how does that compare to the energy flow for commercial aviation?
The question is, how does the jet fuel for the DoD compare to commercial aviation? This is about 0.5%. It's about 1.5% for commercial aviation. So a quarter of all jet fuel is for the DoD, 3/4 is for general aviation.
And that number doesn't include any of the transport or refining costs?
This does not, again, yes, this does not include, this is the raw data, not the, we're showing that you could, with the tools that we're building here, re-slice the data to sort of do full cost accounting, if you like. This is just the raw data. It does not include the portion that was used in processing.
The energy in the fuel burn.
The energy in the fuel burned, yeah.
Your countryman, Helen Caldicott, directed a lot of attention to how costly it is to prepare fissile material that's enriched. Do you think it makes sense to account for the fissile material used for energy at a marginal cost on top of the weapons, or as an average cost?
Roughly, the question is, in the same way, should you count petroleum processing into the energy in it? Should you count the processing of uranium in nuclear? And yes, you should. We don't think we did it here, but you could.
So you think the numbers are available?
No. There are a couple of dead ends in the data trees here, like ammonia. So.
But it's part of the mining budget. Well, I guess, and refining.
Yeah, this is done really for fun. I know that makes me sound weird and my colleagues, like yes, we are that weird. We do this for shits and giggles. You could go further down and you could put error bars on. We could now put a reasonable error bar on all of this data. I think tonight that every single statistic is plus or minus 25% in terms of accuracy. You could go further into mining and break it down with industry trade studies and et cetera, or estimate it by the NAICS code's economic impact through the US Census Bureau, and you'd have plus or minus 50% error bars on that. You could go a little further down the rat hole. We didn't do it for uranium.
And the enrichments as well? Do you have an idea?
There's probably somebody in the audience who can answer the question about enriching uranium. It's less than a sesame seed, so I'm going to ignore it. We're going to stay focused on cheeseburgers, not sub-cheeseburgers. All right, I don't know how long we've gone. Is it about an hour?
It is about an hour, but you said you just have like a couple last slides?
Yeah, we're nearly done. And then we can go into way more questions and speculations, et cetera, et cetera. All right, in the same way that we went back and looked at transport and tried to say, well, what if you included all of the other things in transportation apart from just oil and natural gas, so the industrial contributions. This is a look at food. So you can see things like refrigerators, all the refrigerators for food, cooking for food, process energy for the industrial canning and production of food, et cetera, et cetera. You can see all of this. I'm going to put 50% error bars on this data and this, like, the assumptions behind this. That's actually the last time we're going to look at that. And we'll go back here. This was actually prepared by Dan Recht a long time ago. But I think this is an interesting illustration of the power of really diving into the data here. And I really thank you all for keeping most of your eyeballs awake while we went this nerd deep. So this is every step in the industrial food chain. Agribusiness is about 2%. That is 1% is driving the fuel on the farm, 0.5% in a little more in fertilizers, about 0.25% each in pesticides and herbicides. Processing of food, so this is all of the industrial food products. This is your Twinkies, your cheeseburgers, the slaughtering houses, et cetera, about 3%. Packaging, so this comes out of that paper and plastic budget, 1%. Freight, this actually estimate is low when we went back and looked in the data. This is closer to 1 or 1.2% for trucking the food around. Wholesale retail, keeping all the shops open, 2.5%. Food services, another 2%. In the household, with the biggest error bars about assumptions about your cooking and your natural gas use, et cetera, as much as 4 or 5%. All of that adds up to 15 or 16%. You can see here, refrigeration is one of the dominant pieces, 2.5%, broken down into blue residential and grey commercial. Driving to buy the groceries is sort of in the noise compared to cooking. And so that's kind of interesting. I'll just go back here. I'll make 2 more points, and then we'll go to as many questions as you want. We can go back into that graph, and we can follow down the tree to anyone's on anyone's issues. 15 or 16%. The interesting thing is our best estimates is 31% of food is thrown out before anyone eats it. So if this data is nearly right, that means there's maybe a 5% or a 50 cheeseburger opportunity in cheeseburgers that are going to waste. I don't know how to calculate, but you can't, in the Sankey diagram, it's hard to bring the cheeseburgers back around. So I think that's pretty interesting. And just also, when you really get into the data, you learn some interesting things, and you learn that, and I think we've already learned today that there's a bunch of headlines that you read in the media that I think I have now shaken your faith in as real on energy statistics, like there's a third less solar than you believe, and transport uses way more than you believe, electric cars are better if you run it off your solar cell, worse if you run it off coal, etc. These things are not always unpacked in the media, unfortunately. This is the amount of energy consumed in producing all of these different food products. This is if you assume the waste, so that's how we did an estimate of the waste. What I think is interesting, everyone here will have heard the statistic that being a meat eater is absolutely horrible and you should all be vegetarians. That's, I won't say that's untrue, but it's a lot less true than you think it is. The people who have made that data, so over here, the gray bars are energy input per pound of food eaten, or per kilogram, I prefer, of food eaten. So tiny amount of energy input to grow fruit and vegetables per kilogram, a lot of energy input to grow a kilogram of cow. But then you'd say, well, that might be a little bit unfair, because what we care about is the energy input to the food per the energy calorific output of the food that we get, right? In which case, meat looks about twice as good as it did before, because it's hugely energy dense, the meat in it. Vegetables look far worse. An unbelievable amount of energy goes into not a lot of calories. Now you totally need them for micronutrients. You now need to have a really long discussion about this. But the headline, vegetarianism for the win, is not really super true. I might finish this with a quote from David Mackay, who I started the talk talking about. He was a wonderful guy, a really broad thinker, a little bit cheeky. And he believed that in many parts of the world, the sheep was the only viable solar cell. So on really like marginal lands in New Zealand and way up north, it's not really worth putting a solar cell there. You want to put them in places of high solar insolation. So why don't you just let sheep graze over that area and then pull out the energy in tasty, tasty lamb?
Can I just ask one question on the vegetables? Does that exclude solar energy, natural solar energy?
This, of course, excludes solar energy, right? I think in the, my head is swimming. I swear I've read 5,000 pages in the past 2 weeks, or the footnotes on 5,000 pages. 41, I want to say about 40% of US land area is for growing fruits and vegetables, corn, et cetera, a similar amount, or a large amount, is in grazing lands. But the solar energy in both of those cases is not counted in this. This is the other primary energies in processing food. Which is actually...
Are we jumping into the questions?
We can go in questions, and actually I'll jump off on... I like using your questions to answer the things that I forgot to talk about earlier. So I had a slide earlier. If you gather up all of the things that are wooden or made out of paper, so trees, in terms of products, it's nearly 5% of the energy economy is in your cardboard, your paper, your cellulosic fibers, et cetera. Right? So we all got obsessed with biofuels. Biofuels is probably not the right way to use biology in your energy economy. What biology is really good at is for free. It's got these little computers built into all the cells that do these amazing things like making wood, which is structurally magical, and you can do all these fabulous things with it. So the killer biofuels may be as the input into the industry side, where we're making a huge number more things out of highly engineered, and now we have the tools with synthetic biology to sort of relook at the industrial sector with more biological components, I think that's an unbelievable opportunity to transform the economy in a positive way.
So, are we in the question?
All questions.
We are in the question. There's a woman back here first who has the mic, and we are going to grab the mic. So let's give her a hand.
Thanks. I reserve the right to have the questions. There's about 10 people in the room I know who might have a better answer for any question you might ask me, and I'm going to call them out if I think they have a better answer than I do.
So the woman here, if you could stand up and just give your name and maybe a company reference or what you do.
Hey, my name is Oda.
Oop. Is it on?
Yeah. So I thought that when people say that like being vegetarian is better than eating meat is more on like methane versus nitrous oxide, as well as the embodiment, as well as the energy.
This.
How does the methane stack up to the energy versus nitrous oxide?
This is a great point, and I did the energy nerd. Okay, the point is, so meat produces a lot of methane, at least cows, and the ruminant meat produces methane, and it produces in great quantity. Methane is about 22 times worse than CO2 as a atmospheric gas in terms of climate change. So a lot of the people who are highly in favor of meat use that statistic, and I think if you were to do a fully fair analysis of meat, you have to do that, and that is the correct way, part of the correct way to think about it. But I'm fairly sure in all the people who have done the studies that way, they are still dividing by kilograms of food, not calories of food. So it's just in the same way. I definitely said the headline that meat is much worse than vegetables is just less true than you think.
There's a woman in the back there.
Hi there. My name's Renee, and I work in urban natural resources. So I'm torn between two questions, and maybe you can just choose from those two. The first one is, as Bay Area residents, we all have this luxury of eating all this really precious food. And so I always wonder how sanctimonious I can feel about the food that I actually access at the farmer's market in comparison to industrial agriculture. And then the second question is, when you are talking to, let's say, someone who doesn't understand any of this, and they just want to know what's the one or two things that the choices that they can make in their daily life to have a positive impact, because it becomes opaque so quickly. And even after looking at all that, I think I'm of course,
this is more opaque.
More confusing, right? So.
Right, both of those questions are great. I will answer both of them. The point of this exercise, and maybe you were all lured in by the cheeseburger headline, and then you were sucker punched with more data than you ever wanted to see. That is true. Hopefully Alex Kaufman, who's sitting here, is going to help me translate this into a readable general public book, but it won't have any graphs in it. He's made me promise. So to the question of, is your farmer's market sanctimonious food in fact sanctimonious, or is it good or bad? It's per energy calorie delivered to the people, it's worse than industrial goods. Right. Now, if you were growing some of it in your garden, that's probably better. It really comes down to how many miles it's traveled and a whole bunch of stuff. But the answer is you shouldn't probably feel that great about it. I think what you I too eat from the local market, and we have a CSA, and I think you have to think about it slightly differently. Let me tell you a long story to come back to this. So Burning Man Group asked me many years ago, would I please help them be their green environmental champion the year that they were going to have the green Burning Man. And I have an uneasy relationship with Burning Man because I own a lot of tools and have a lot of machines. Every Burning Man year, all the burners come to my office, they ruin my tools, and then they return them with corrosive dust. So I roughly hate Burning Man for that reason. Burning Man, it's an interesting thing. About 3 days before they sent me this email, I went to a monster truck rally at Oakland Coliseum with my 4-year-old son, and it was amazing, right? And it was very easy to say, to write a very angry email back to Burning Man that, like, what you are doing is possibly the worst environmental thing you could do. You're encouraging 80,000 people to travel huge distances, to sit in the sun, use a whole lot of disposable stuff, right? It's an environmental nightmare. And I actually built a very strong argument that the monster truck rally prevented a lot of people from driving monster trucks all the time because they all got there, they had their fix, and that monster truck rallies are way better than Burning Man. Which, all right, I don't want to offend, I think I might have offended everyone in the audience with this. The point is, and again, I'm gonna, I had a very long friendship with David Mackay about energy, and we would go into the minutiae in the weeds, and we would take turns at getting horribly depressed that we weren't making any progress in a substantive sense towards solving climate change. And the depressing, in one of my bouts of depression, I sent him something, some question like you've asked, or some data around a question like that. And he said, look, what you have to understand is all human activity is folly, right? There's nothing more or less noble about Burning Man than a monster truck rally, than your farmer's market habit, than my wife's, she really insists on having the New York Times in print on Sunday, despite me pointing at the newsprint up here and saying, see, we should read it online. What a horrible and mean existence it would be for humanity if we didn't allow folly, right? And so I think in the environmentalist movement is appropriately and deeply criticized for presenting it's been called the hair shirt future, right? We'll all become hippies, we'll wear the hair shirts, and it's not. Right, no, in the future we're going to eat 10,000 cheeseburgers produced by solar power, or another friend of mine, Tim Anderson, if you know him, you're lucky. He might even be here. I'm not sure. He's a spectacular human being. I was discussing this with him, and I said, Tim, we need a positive narrative for the future that people, because I think the environmental movement is devoid of positive narratives like we've solved climate change and life is good. About an hour later, he writes me an email. He says, in the future, we will bow hunt monk-raised bison from electric SUVs on Thursdays. And as with, he's either the craziest person you know or the smartest person you know, and everyone who knows Tim knows that. It's kind of sage advice. It's like if you unpack the statement, you're still going to have activities that are super fun and adventurous and wild, like the bow hunting. You're going to have stewardship of the environment represented by the monk-raised bison, right? You're going to have fully electrified vehicle fleet, the electric SUV that we're driving around. You only do it on Thursdays, so you do it within reason. I don't know, I've lost okay, all the hands shoot up. You're wrong, I want something else.
No, we got someone in the back here, and then there's someone down here. Just put your hands up if you want to. We're trying to get a mic to you, but right now we got one here, and then we got one here. Then we got one.
David McConville with the Buckminster Fuller Institute. Two questions. Water cooling for thermoelectric, does that figure into any of the metrics anywhere? Does that actually quantify in any kind of energy sense? And number two, in your ideal world, where does this go?
Okay, let's start with number one, water cooling for thermoelectrics. It's actually all in here, and if I hadn't trodden on the cord, I could show you something about it. So instead of pointing up there, I'll just give you some narrative anecdotes about water cooling of thermoelectrics. So apart from photovoltaic cells, nearly all of the electricity we get comes from essentially spinning a steam turbine. So nuclear energy, it's just make some heat the water, make steam, cool it down, spin the turbine, generate the electricity. It's the same with coal, it's the same with natural gas, it's the same with nearly everything. And so thermoelectric cooling is enormously important in many, many senses. A lot of you will remember the French heat wave about half a dozen years ago. France, I think, their economy is hugely electrified compared to most people because they went super long and super deep on nuclear a long time ago. The heat wave meant the temperature of the rivers rose a little, which meant that they had to dial down the nuclear power plants because they had environmental regulations about the downstream temperature that you could take the heated water and put it back in the river. So the delta T of their plants went down, so the electricity grid went down a little bit, just as the demand for air conditioning went to peak. And they were literally cool water limited, and that was one small fraction of the reason that a lot of people died in that. I can give you a horrifying statistic and tell you that 41% of fresh water in the US goes through a thermoelectric power plant. And you're like, oh my God. Remember that 40% of it goes back into the water system as slightly warmer water. 1% is evaporated to steam, because if you evaporate water to steam, you get this 1 or 2% higher efficiency out of your power plant. So in some cases, people try and do that. There are multiple states in this country where they've basically run out of cool water. So you couldn't add, it would be extremely difficult in Arizona and New Mexico to add more thermoelectric power plants, not because you can't put a coal plant or a nuclear plant there, because there isn't enough cold water to cool it down. Then it's hugely important, that question, and it relates to heat exchangers. And if you put heat exchangers through that metric in here, they're even more important than you think. It's an interesting question. Now I've completely forgotten your second question.
Where does this go?
Oh, where does this go? Right now it looks terrible. I think it would be really, I naively believe, and it's interesting to say this statement as Hillary Clinton is in an election far closer than it should be, at least from my perspective, and she's speaking right now. I would still like to believe in science-based policy. I can tell you we absolutely don't do that in a huge portion of the energy sector, right down to my wife and I are trying to build a house in San Francisco, nominally thinks it's one of the greenest cities in the world. 4.5 years in, we've had to make a huge number of compromises that make the house less green. There's a Title 24 regulation that you score points on, and you have to get a certain number of points to prove that your house is green enough. The points are assigned pseudo-randomly, much like the LEED Platinum. That's like you buy yourself. It's I don't know. It's crazy. There is a word I'm thinking of. It's like folly, but not. Anyway, we had to make half a dozen decisions that made the house environmentally worse just to make it legal in the greenest city in the world. And there's cases like we're basing transportation policy, not doing the full accounting of just how much energy is in it. I think hopefully I convinced you that electrifying the transportation sector is even more important than we already thought. So I would like this to become much more publicly known in much more detail, and slicing and cutting the data in more intuitive ways that help us make better policy. Part of the reason I'm going to now conjoin your question with the one I didn't answer from this lady, which was, this is all confusing, what are the most important things to do? And I think on that topic, we all remember the halcyon days of Al Gore and The Inconvenient Truth, right? And you'd watch that movie and you get thoroughly depressed and a little bit inspired and let's go out and change the world. And the end of the movie it said, change your light bulbs, and a couple of small things that influenced 2 or 3% of this chart. I think they might have had put electric car in your garage and put solar cells on your roof, but your roof's not big enough for the solar cells to offset all the cheeseburgers you want. So, it wasn't a very satisfying answer. I think if you did a full accounting of this, like what individual purchasing decisions can you make as a consumer, what portion of this do you influence, I think you only influence about 40% of this. I think, as I've convinced you tonight, a huge amount of the energy in this country is in our infrastructure, right? And if you thought of our transportation fleet, including our personal cars, as in fact infrastructure, it's our collective infrastructure in a sense, right? It's even more is in this infrastructure. And environmentalists can argue to make sensible decisions till you're blue in the face regarding your individual purchasing decisions, and you can have a stainless steel water bottle instead of a lot of plastic ones. That doesn't get us there. To really solve this, we have to solve a lot of things at deep infrastructure level. And so my first answer to you is you need to be civically engaged in science-based policymakers. That's the most important decision. Like, percentage-wise, it really is the biggest thing here. The next... It means you, it means you vote. It means you probably don't vote for one of these people. I'll be very honest with you. I don't get to vote here. I'm not yet a registered American. I've married one. And there's no way I'm influencing her vote. I know how she's voting already. And it's not for that guy. The question was asked, so anyway, ask your question again, because I forgot it when I thought about my wife. I just see.
In science-based policy, which means what?
Help your representatives understand science. Help the city of San Francisco change. I think part of the problem is we're not running any experiments because the federal government is in fact setting policies that influence everywhere. So the department, let me take one example. You saw me show you that 8% of energy was in 1 to 10 mile or 1 to 20 mile trips, right? We take 1 to 20 mile trips that are rarely done at more than 25 or 35 miles per hour in 6,000 pound cars capable of 200 miles per hour. We have a Department of Transport that looks over all of these things. They've created a category of neighborhood electric vehicle, which would be great. It's basically an oversized golf cart. They're all electric, and in some gated communities, they're legal. Right? They can do 25 miles per hour, which is the speed limit. They are 10 times more energy effective than your Tesla, but it's unclear that they're very legal. And so civic engagement, but that, you could influence 10% of your own pie by going to City Hall and saying, we want to change any of these to have a 35 mile per hour speed limit because that would be a little bit safer than 25 miles per hour doesn't quite merge with contemporary traffic in the city of San Francisco, right? And then you change the rules of the Department of Transport, and then you change the rules at a whole bunch of cities so that we're all driving those for the 1 to 5 mile trips and the 1 to 10 mile trips. So there's a concrete example. Lots of things like that.
Well, could I just add that there is someone and I don't want to put someone on the spot, but we actually have Stephen Chu in the audience here, the former Department of Energy
I very
Secretary.
consciously didn't call upon Steve through the whole talk because I knew he would probably contradict a lot of things that I said.
But would you want to give any thoughts to that question about what do we do about influencing science-based policy, without putting you too much on the spot here?
I think the first suggestion of trying to support representatives who will listen more to science. I think too much of our government is based on the second golden rule in politics. Well, there's 3 rules. The second one is to get reelected. And to get reelected, you have to get donations. And then in some part, there's an influence of going to the bidder who's willing to give you more donations. And that thwarts some of the science-based policy because you see a lot of elected officials.
Yeah, these people spend have a big budget to spend on lobbying. Right. And these people up here, with solar, have a tiny amount of money.
But I think in terms of, I would always, when people ask me that, I would always point to, do things in your own personal life in terms of energy efficiency, both in the 2,000 or 2,500 pound car versus the 6,000 pound car, but also in trying to structure your life and where you live. So, I used up 5% of my mileage per year to get to this meeting.
I feel privileged.
Because I drive about 1,000 miles a year. Okay, so, and it's bicycling, and I'm really a nerd. I don't go in the city to entertain myself. So, so there's things like that, I think. Just a trivial thing, my wife and I live in a house. We don't have air conditioning. It's in the I work at Stanford, so, and sometimes it gets to over 100. If you do heat management correctly, which means you cool your home down at night, even when it was 100, the house never got over 75 without air conditioning, because you cool it down to 65 at night, and then all the south and west facing you have these white shades, and you just block the light, and so the air conditioning is humongous. There are other things that are not captured in this, which are the derivatives. Where is the increase in energy going, and how is it being shifted? Refrigerators used to be the biggest, aside from air conditioning, was the biggest sink. But it's if you have cable TV, and about 100 million people have cable TV, and you have 3 of those boxes, that's 2 refrigerators that are on 24/7. Okay, and when I was secretary, I tried to regulate that, and they just waited me out because they're consuming about 100 watts. If you have 3 boxes, they should consume about 1 watt on standby.
You can go in here and you can see it is.
It's
about
horrendous.
0.5%, yeah.
Yeah, because they don't turn off anything in the box. They don't put it on a crystal oscillator, wake it up for programming, download into flash drive. They don't do any of that stuff because they would have to spend money to reprogram. And they use old electronics because they would still have to, so they recycle the outside of the box, but the inside is still the same. It's really terrible. And so but consumers have no control over that. Mm-hmm. They do have control about how much air conditioning they use. They do have control about how much fuel they use in cars and things like that. And, and whether they walk and bicycle versus ride a car. And, younger generation is spending much more to be a premium to not waste 2 hours of their life a day, 5 days a week, to live closer to work. And it's no longer the little garden and the split level and just wasting your time. So these are things that at least are very encouraging. Now the good news is, yes, we're only 0.5% solar in electricity generated and consumed, but it's probably going to go 3 or 4%. Wind is going to surpass hydro. Hydro is 6.5%. Wind is about 5% today, and within a year or two, it's going to surpass hydro. Solar is going to get up to 3 or 4% until it gives the utility companies a heartache.
That's all electricity, already, not total.
Yeah, but the other thing is, I just one more comment, and that is, this was properly an energy flow diagram, but the real thing is the greenhouse emissions flow diagram. And that's another way of looking at it, and agriculture and land use is 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions of the world. 30%. And so there was, it goes to the comment about, land use, beef, this, that, the other thing. And so the over-fertilization, the last 10% is causing a lot of the nitrous oxide, the methane, and the cows are much less efficient than a pig. And, as you go to, lambs are more efficient than cows, and so the cows are the most
Chickens are great, eggs are better.
Chickens are great.
Right. 2 to 1.
Well, I mean, they get to full size within a fraction of a year. A turkey gets to full size within 1 year now. It's been bred into it.
It went from, this is a scary thing. I happen to know this statistic as I read it, because chickens are in here. It went from 83 days to mature a chicken in 1950 to 41 days today.
Yeah. Well, grain production per acre went up 8-fold in the United States.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the description, that goes to Saul's comment about land use. The industrial farming is actually more efficient, but sadly, but it has some other byproducts, and that it can all be improved. But in terms of the personal lifestyle and consumer choice, these are all okay, it's okay, but if I think about recycling, it's a nit compared to a big car. Yeah, recycling plastic, as an example.
To riff off Stephen, my wife and I consciously designed our lives so we'd live in Bernal and we'd have our workplace in the Mission and we could walk or ride bikes everywhere. And then our son reached school age. And San Francisco has a lottery, and we lotteried into a school on the opposite side of the city, which there was no public transport to, which now meant that we had about 5.5 miles each way twice a day. So the mileage in our house went from we were averaging 5 miles a day, went immediately to 25 miles a day in the trips to school. I did a lot of it on an electric bike, and occasionally I could convince my wife to. But this is science-based policy. Yes, I think there's a lot of good things. Well, actually, you would say, is this a folly? There's a lot of good things about a school lottery. There's a lot of bad things. Totally unexpected is that you're now making all of the parents of San Francisco crisscross, right? And actually, there's a really interesting point, which is, I think, speaks exactly to what Stephen's just said, and it's something that I think is hugely important, and is the point about infrastructure is key. But we drive great distances because we want to go from one beautiful place to another beautiful place and skip the ugliness in between, right? If you make everywhere beautiful, so all the schools are good, all the shops are good, right? Then people, I think there's a good argument to say that by making much better localities to live in, we can lower the energy cost, yet make everyone's lives a whole lot better. And so I think those decisions are important. And then by the numbers, buy an electric car, run it off your roof. Don't air condition your house. We are putting a dry cellar in our house, so we're going to geothermally cool a lot of our vegetables and our larder, right? We got 0 points for that in Title 24. You know, we got points for putting in a heating system. We got 86 points out of the 200 we needed by putting it in a heating system we didn't want to pass Title 24. Like, there's all sorts of things like that. And yes, lowering your footprint. This is explicitly energy because I think it's, we use this in my office because we work on energy technologies. We don't do a lot of agriculture. I totally agree, agriculture is enormous. I think gardening and agriculture is really an extraordinarily important technology, and that part of the point I made about cellulosics, it's a much larger portion of the energy economy is agriculture if you include all of the cellulosics that we use, and we could increase that, in fact, and yet lower greenhouse gas emissions. There's a huge opportunity. Really the only two places we can sink carbon cost effectively are in dirt and trees right now, and we can wish for clean coal and sequestration all we like, but the things that work today is dirt and trees. So there's maybe a 2 for win there.
Hey, I tell you what, I think this is a great moment. Again, Stephen Chu, former Secretary of the Energy with Obama, and Saul Griffith. How do you categorize Saul? But that exchange, I think, is a good time to stop because actually we have drinks and some more food, and there's so many awesome people in this group here that you should all connect up. And those who want to still talk to Saul, he's here. And let's give a really great round of applause to Saul and his team. And just a really...
Thank you, everyone. Arch and Nikhil.
Again, there's more drinks, there's more food. Stay here. And also, these are going to continue starting in September. We're skipping August. September, October, come back. It's a great place to be. Thank you all.